Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, as we commence this afternoon session, which is the award winners lecture, may I request that we all rise to our feet for the national anthem of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. The national anthem. Standing, may we adopt the second stanza of the national anthem as our national prayer. We'll recite it together. You can find the words on the second page of the program. O God of creation, direct our noble cause, guide our leaders right, help our youth truth to know, in love and honesty to grow, and living just and true, great lofty heights attain, to build a nation where peace and justice reign. Amen. May we be seated. Thank you. The Chief Host, the Honorable Minister of Special Duties and Intergovernmental Affairs, represented by the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry, Mrs. Ibiane Patricia Roberts, Special Advisor to the President on Media and Publicity, Mr. Chairman of the Governing Board of the NNMA, Professor Shekarau Aku, members of the Governing Board, past Chairman of the Governing Board, distinguished laureates, Vice Chancellors and their representatives here present, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, of course not forgetting the students of Bingham University and the Nasarawa State University who've been with us from the start of this program. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, this is the 13th Annual Forum of Laureates of the Nigerian National Order of Merit. This afternoon, we'll be privileged to listen to the award winners lecture that will be presented by the distinguished Professor Ni Oshundari, NNOM. At this point, may I invite the Chairman, NNMA Governing Board, Professor Shekarau Yakubu Aku, to now formally welcome you to this award winners lecture. Mr. Chairman, sir.
Special advisor to the President in the person of Mr. members, past chairman of the board, members of the board, laureates, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, it is with profound joy and great honor that I welcome you to this august occasion of the 2022 Second Award Winners Lecture of the year 2022. The Award Winners Lecture is aimed at providing first-hand insights into the issues that the laureates of the Nigerian National Order of Merit, NNOM, consider crucial to national development that deserve the attention of all Nigerians. The recipients of the NNOM award are people who have made outstanding and valuable contributions to national and global attainments in all fields of human endeavor, divided into 4 areas: engineering and technology, the humanities, including education and culture, the sciences, and medicine. The governing board of the NNMA from 1979 to date has conferred the prestigious award of NNOM on 79 distinguished Nigerians. One of these highly eminent Nigerians is the award winners lecture we are going to hear today. It will be delivered by Professor Ni Oshundari. NNOM recipients are expected to deliver an award winners lecture at least once in their lifetimes. In the light of this, it is with immense joy that I congratulate the distinguished laureate, Professor Ni Oshundari, NNOM, a recipient of the NNOM Award in Humanities in the year 2014, the sole recipient of the NNMA Order in 2014. He will be delivering the lecture today titled Poetry and the Human Voice. Ladies and gentlemen, it is no exaggeration to say that Professor NNOM is a man to be reckoned with, as his contributions to the nation's educational sector have in no doubt been a radical force of change and enlightenment. Professor Ni Oshundari is a renowned African poet, playwright, distinguished linguist and literary critic. We can refer to him as an oracle in the literary world. His poetry is influenced by the oral poetry of his Yoruba culture, which he capriciously hybridizes with other poetic traditions of the world, including African American, Latin American, Asian, and European poets. He is a free speech advocate, and his creative and critical writings are closely related to political activism, decolonization, Black internationalism, and the environment. He is indeed a friend and a poetic grant. He is indeed a friend and a poetic giant, if I may add. My joy knows no bounds as I have observed that all the beneficiaries of this reputable and revered award have gained both national and international recognition. I am also thrilled with the fact that today's lecture is taking place right in the midst of distinguished laureates, academicians, intellectuals, as well as students from diverse fields of endeavor. Therefore, the quality of this audience is high. I therefore implore everyone here seated to recommit to appreciating the outstanding contributions of the Nigerian National Merit Award and its laureates to national growth and development, thereby reaffirming the commitment of the governing board towards generating the needed innovations for nurturing our fast evolving economic culture. This will in turn lead to an enhanced and enviable state of the overall socio-economic, socio-political, and scientific technological advancement of our great nation, Nigeria. I congratulate Professor Osundare for his achievements. I thank you for giving this auspicious event your undivided attention. I wish you happily listening to the lecture. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chairman of the Governing Board, Professor Aku. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, may I now call the representative of the Chief Host, the Honorable Minister of Special Duties and Intergovernmental Affairs, Dr. George Aku, to present his address. Let's welcome the Permanent Secretary of the Ministry, Mrs. Roberts. Thank you.
So I'll start with Professor Niyi Oshundare, NNOM, the chairman of the governing board and members of the board, the special advisor to Mr. President. Kindly permit me to align to the existing protocol. Obviously, I am not the Honorable Minister of Special Duties and Intergovernmental Affairs. I have been asked to read his address. And it goes like this. It gives me great pleasure meaning the Honorable His Excellency, Senator Dr. George Akume, great pleasure and distinct honor to make a few remarks at this great occasion, the second award winners lecture of the Nigerian National Merit Award for the year 2022. The award winners lecture is aimed to provide a first-hand insight into the issues that the laureates of the Nigerian National Order of Merit, NNOM, considered crucial to national development to the extent that they deserve the attention of all Nigerians. I am delighted to note that all beneficiaries of this prestigious, revered award, the NNOM award, have a national as well as international recognition. The NNMA award is one of the most important programs of the NNMA, designed primarily to assist in creating the enabling environment in which healthy and intellectual discourse and exchange of ideas are fostered. The basic objectives of the award winners' lectures are to officially and publicly promote the platform for the best and the brightest of Nigerian intellectual laureates to share with their compatriots their intellectual inquiry for national development. The award winners lecturer for today, the distinguished Professor Niyi Oshundare, NNOM, is a renowned professor of English whose matchless role as a committed public intellectual has earned him the title, the People's Poet. Professor Niyi Oshundare bagged his award in 2014 and will be presenting a paper titled Poetry and Human Voice. The focus on poetry and human voice could not have come at a better time, given the upcoming election and the need for Nigerians to be able to lend their voice to the development of our great nation. This lecture is to serve as a catalyst in our search for political, social, cultural, and economic transformation in the context of peace and unity of the nation. This is particularly important as our leaders under the present democratic dispensation are charting a new course in the promotion of unity and understanding within Nigeria, the ECOWAS sub-region, Africa, and the globe as a whole. This lecture should therefore be seen as an effort in that direction. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I thank you all for your patience and attention and wish you all a very fruitful session. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Permanent Secretary, Mrs. Ibiene Patricia Roberts, delivering the address of the Honorable Minister of Special Duties and Intergovernmental Affairs, Dr. George Akume. Distinguished laureates, ladies and gentlemen, there is a performance which we will witness this afternoon, and that will come just before the award winners lecture. I want to call on these persons, believing they are right here in the hall, to now step forward in line with this poem. Please, where shall I place your bribe, my lord? The poet, Professor Niyi Oshundare, NNOM, and let me call on Adetola Eimofe Jerry Adeseo, and Adishike Itoyosi, Jerry Adisho, if they're in here, to step forward and perform this. You should be interested to watch.
Good day, distinguished guests of honor, ladies and gentlemen, and dear students. I'm Adetola Imofe Jerry Adeshewo, and I'm here to say a poem titled, Please Tell Me Where to Keep Your Bribe. Please do enjoy. Do I drop it in your vulnerable chambers or carry the heavy booty to your immaculate mansion? Shall I bury it in the capacious water tank in your well-laundered backyard, or will it breathe better in the septic tank, since money can deodorize the smearless crimes? Shall I haul it up the attic between the ceiling and your lofty roof, or shall I conjure the walls to open up and swallow this sudden bounty from your honest labor? Shall I give $1 billion to each of your paramours, the black, the light, the Fanta yellow? They will surely know how to keep the loot in places too remote for the sniffing dog. Or shall I use the particulars of your anonymous maidservant and manservant with their names and overflowing bank accounts, while they famish like ownerless dog? Shall I haul it all to your village in the valley behind the mountains? Or shall I conjure the walls to open up and swallow this sudden bounty? Shall I, my lord, it will take the fastest machine many, many days to count this booty, and lucky bank bosses may help themselves to a fraction of the loot. My lord, tell me where to keep your bribe. The last hope of the common man has become the last bastion of the criminal rich. A terrible plague bestrides the land, besieged by rapacious judges and their venal lawyers. Behind the antiquated wig and the slavish glove, the penguin gown and the obfuscating dragon is a rotten riot whose stench is choking the land. Behind the rituals and rotted migraos, all wood antiques connive with new tricks. Behind the prim and proper costumes of masquerades, corruption stands, naked in its insolent impunity, for sale to the highest bidder, interlocutory and perpetual injunctions. Opulent criminals shop for pylon judges, protect the criminal, enshrine the crime. And election petition tribunals bless those gold mines and bottomless booties. Scoundrel votes, riggers, rump to all hail our buyable bench and conniving bar. $1 million in €1 million in the kitchen sink, countless nairas in the parlor closet. Our courts are fast running out of Ghana must goes. The temple of justice is broken in every brick. The roof is roundly perforated by termite of graft. My lord, tell me where to keep your bribe. Judges those in the courtroom, having spent all night counting money and various gifts, and the Chief Justice looks on with tired eyes as corruption usurps his gavel. Crime pays in this country. Corruption has its handsome rewards. Just one judgment sold to the richest bidder will catapult judge and lawyer to the millionaires club. The law, they say, is an ass, sometimes fast, sometimes slow. But the law in Nigeria is a vulture, fat on the cash and carry and off murdered conscience. Walk by Bifalare. They kill our trust in a common good, those monsters of mammon in their garish gowns. Unhappy the land where jobless are judges, where impunity walk the streets like a large invincible demon. Come Sunday, they trip to the church. Friday, they mount their mantra in pious mosques. But they pervert justice all week long and dig us deeper into the hellish hole. Nigeria is a huge corpse with milling maggots on its wretched hulk. They pray every day. They pray every night for the endless decomposition of our common soul. My most honorable Lord, just tell me where to keep your bribe. Thank you.
Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, we just heard Aditola with Where Shall I Keep Your Bribe, My Lord? I thought perhaps we were going to see another performance by Adishike. Is she right in the hall? Thank you.
Good day, everyone. My name is Jerry Adeshewa Adeshike, and I'll be reciting a poem titled The Leader and the Led by Professor Niyi Oshudari. Thank you. The lion stakes his claim to the leadership of the pack, but the antelope remembers the fierce pounds of his paws. The hyena says the crown is made for him, but the impalas shudder at his lethal appetite. The giraffe craves the place at the front, but its eyes are too far from the ground. When the zebra said the crocodile is his right to lead, the pack points at the duplicity of his stripes. The elephant charges into the power tussle, but his colleagues dread his trampling feet. The war dog's too ugly, the rhino too riotous, and the pack trashes around like a snake without a head. Our need calls for a hybrid of habits, proclaims the forest sage. A little bit of a lion, a little bit of a lamb. Tough like a tiger, compassionate like a doe. Transparent like a river, mysterious like a lake. A leader who knows how to follow. Followers mindful of their right to lead. Thank you.
Another sterling performance by Adeshike. Distinguished laureates, ladies and gentlemen, that was a taste, but now it is time to listen to the master himself. May I request that Professor Oshudari, NNOM, widely regarded as one of Africa's most renowned poets, scholars, and public intellectuals, Niyi Oshudari has authored over 20 books of poetry, 2 books of selected poems with individual poems in over 100 journals and magazines across the world, 4 plays, a book of essays, and numerous monographs and articles on literature, language, culture, and society. He regards his calling as a writer and his profession as a teacher as essentially complementary. He was educated on 3 continents: BA honors from the University of Ibadan, Nigeria, MA from the University of Leeds in England, and PhD from York University, Toronto, Canada. For his creative works, Oshudari has received many prizes and awards, including the Association of Nigerian Authors Poetry Prize, the Cadbury A&A Poetry Prize, which he won on 2 different occasions, 1989 and 1994, the Commonwealth Poetry Prize, the Noma Award, Africa's most prestigious book award, the Chikaya Utamzi Award for African Poetry, generally regarded as Africa's highest poetry award, and the Fonyon Nichols Award for Excellence in Literary Creativity combined with significant contributions to human rights in Africa. In 2004, his award-winning book of poems, The Eye of the Earth, was selected as one of Nigeria's best 25 books of the 20th century by a jury appointed by Spectrum Books Nigeria. His poem, Rain Drum, along with its Yoruba translation, was selected as part of Nigeria's contribution to the cultural events which complemented the 2012 London Olympics. His widely anthologized poem, I Sing of Change, has been displayed for many weeks on the London Underground and displayed in over 2,000 other spaces around the world. In 2014, he was admitted to the Nigerian National Order of Merit, NNOM, Nigeria's highest recognition for distinguished intellectual and creative achievement. A strong believer in poetry as performance, he has carried out readings and performances of his works in many parts of the world, and his poems have been translated into French, Italian, Slovenian, Korean, German, Dutch, Spanish, Portuguese, Japanese, Arabic, Serbian. In 2016, he was awarded the Doctor of Letters honoris causa by his alma mater, the University of Ibadan, Nigeria. He also has been a recipient of honorary doctorates from the University of Toulouse in France and Franklin Pierce University in New Hampshire, USA. He was a columnist for Newswatch, a prominent Nigerian news magazine from 1986 to 2011. From 1985 to 2003, he ran a weekly poetry column named Songs of the Season in the Sunday Tribune, changed the column's name to Lifelines the following year, and transferred it to The Nation, another leading Nigerian newspaper, in 2006. He is also a frequent media commentator on social, political, cultural, and literary matters. In 2015, the Ni Oshundari International Poetry Festival was inaugurated as an annual festival of poetry readings, performances, scholarly conferences, literary, cultural outreach, and mentoring. At the center of Oshundari's social and literary activism are issues such as human rights, social justice, the environment, climate change, and the plight of our planet. He is Emeritus Distinguished Professor of English at the University of New Orleans, USA, and Visiting Professor at the University of Ibadan, Nigeria. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, Professor Ni Oshundari, NNOM.
Thank you very, very much. Thank you very much, Cyril Stober. Those are two words I always look forward to on NTA. Thank you for making me one of the beneficiaries of the honey of your voice once again. The chairman of the NNMA, Professor Shakarau Yakubu Aku, and the representative of the Minister of Internal Duties and Intergovernmental Affairs, his representative, and I want to crave your indulgence. As we say in Nigeria, all other protocol duly observed. Before I go on to my lecture, I just want to thank the Nigerian National Merit Award organization for making this kind of occasion possible. This is the company in which I am comfortable. All my life, it's been like that, and it's going to be like that until I breathe my last. These are like-thinking and book-hungry people who know that ideas rule the world and that the future is normally the past, which we have forgotten to remember. I have here, I'm not going to mention any names, one of those who taught me at the University of Ibadan. And today is sitting here as one of the youngest laureates of the NNOM, Professor Ayo Bamboshe. The example people like him laid, people like him and Ayo Banjo and Dan Izebaye, and so many others who taught me on the other continents. These are the examples we've been following. And I also have my contemporaries whose inspirations have fired the energy of my own imagination. As Femi Oshofisan, the dramatist and poet, and so many other things, Ulu Obafemi, and the man who knows that the road never forgets. That is Yemi Ogunbiyi. And finally, somebody who hardly remembers that he actually taught us in 1968 at Christ School, Ado Ekiti, Professor Adamulekun. He was a young man then. Well, he's still a young man today. My students, my former students, too, many of them are here. I thank you. For me, teaching is a two-way process. A good learner is a good teacher. A good teacher is a good learner. My creative writing classes at the University of Ibadan have been extremely useful. I have people like Chiedu Ezeana, who now bears a beard, wears a beard as witness for this. And finally, because the day is long, I want to thank students from Bingham University. This is the third day and you've been here all along. It makes a lot of the year, and your Vice Chancellor is also here. The future is here with us, ladies and gentlemen. You are the future. And we have misled this country in so many ways. But we are not a wasted generation. As I was saying at the University of Abuja yesterday, please forgive our transgressions. Try to pick whatever ideas that are positive that you see in us and forge a way ahead. We must never lose Nigeria. This is one of, as Professor Yang was saying the other time, and the former speakers, this is one country in the world that is so endowed. But we do not seem to appreciate this country. You know, people say you don't know the value of something until you lose it. We are not going to lose Nigeria. If we keep my principle, and I've said it in interviews and so on, is if we cannot make Nigeria succeed together, we are not likely to make it succeed apart. Nation building is hard work. Every nation is a country in progress. We must not stay away. I thank you very, very much for this, and I also want to thank NNOM. We, as I said in my acceptance speech 8 years ago, we are, metaphorically, like the oasis in the Nigerian desert. We must make sure that that oasis blooms the desert. This is one organization in which I am 100% confident. And I believe that we have the ideas, we have the women and the men to make this country great. So thank you. Now, and the young lady, two young ladies who read the poem, it appears you don't like people giving bribes. Neither do I. Thank you for your performance. Poetry and the Human Voice. That is the title of my lecture. In the beginning was not the Word. In the Word was the beginning. Permit me to begin this lecture with a borrowing from one of my books, which is at the stand there. The Word is an egg. This tells its own story about the genesis and ontology of the Word and the conquest of silence. Once upon a time, in the land of sighs and silences, light and shadow, dawn and dusk, there was a girl named Omaleti, whose kind of beauty the world had never known. An exquisitely shaped piece of nature's work, she was a delight to behold, a subject of supreme enchantment. Her skin glowed like polished ebony. Her lips were sculpted by 7 winds and 7 whispers. Her black face pronounced the whiteness of her teeth, set and rhymed like the beadwork of an accomplished craft spirit. Rainbows played in the sky above her roof. Gold glowed in the dust beneath her feet. If there was a human being who came to this world without any physical blemish, that person was Omaleti. But there was a great problem. Omaleti's village had been afflicted with silence. Their tongues utterly locked up in their mouths. This spell was bound to continue until Omaleti found a husband. Suitors came in all shapes and forms. Some were handsome and absolutely gorgeous. Some were hunchbacked and repulsive like toads. Some were princes from distant kingdoms. Some came proud by their extravagant presence. One even came with a cap decked in diamond and slippers made of gold. Behind him were 1,000 porters. In front was another laden with gifts of rarest immensity. Omaleti saw them all, but her answer was a resounding no. And yet, Omaleti was growing older. Her village steeped deeper and deeper in silence. Then, from the far, far land of something and nothing, from the darkness of noon and the dazzling light of night, half man, half matter, half clad, half nude, dwarf and giant, maker and breaker, haloed by 7 rainbows over 7 crossroads, Oro walked into town one evening and Omaleti swooned into helpless love. The day Omaleti wed her groom, the world was loud with indescribable. To this day, no one can say for sure what it was, Oro, that is the word, whispered into the ears of Omaleti. All the village remembers is that no sooner had this extraordinary been proposed, Omaleti consented. No sooner had he parted his lips than Omaleti's face broke into a paradise of smiles. It all looked like the story of 2 companions from the other life, meeting again on this side of the great river. and locking up in suspended embrace. But word did not come empty-handed to his in-laws' domain. He opened one of his bags and song emerged, followed by drum, followed by dance, then laughter, then 7 orobo, then a gigantic tuber of yam, then a pot of wine. He opened the other one, and out came wisdom, memory, knowledge, the proverb, and other facilitators of reasoned eloquence. Omoleti tied the nuptial knot. The land broke its knot of silence. Oro gave the land its tongue. Joyful songs took over the village. The drum commanded a listening audience. The wind scattered its joy to the 7 corners of the earth. Shall we conclude our story by saying, and everyone lived happily and eloquently ever after? Then came the sign. I have employed the above simple but intriguing tale not just to invent a handy etiology for the origin of language and silence, of the marriage of word and ear in an imaginary Yoruba noetic tradition, but more important, to refocus our attention on the primacy of the oral word, its protean possibilities and facilitative capacity. This is no idle game or gratuitous task in the first quarter of a new century. For no century could be more contradictory than the just concluded one in its attitude towards the spoken word, the enthusiasm, energy, resourcefulness with which its scholars cultivated interest and deployed expertise in the gathering, collation, and analysis of oral texts, resources from many parts of the world. The comparativist intelligence which informed the analysis, and the establishment of oral literature, which once was a rowdily contentious terminology at the outset, but which later rose to near universal acceptance on its insistence on figurative intelligence as a valid and genuine field of study all over the world. The activities of oral literature scholars and enthusiasts in this regard compel comparison with those of descriptive linguists and ethnographers of the first half of the 20th century, who took the study and appreciation of human languages from the classroom and language laboratories to the actual language communities, thus progressing from theory to practice and enriching both enterprises in the process. Their field work contributed significantly to the drastic reduction in linguistic prejudice and enabled the establishment of a regimen of language universals, thus laying the foundation for the Chomsky Revolution in the second half of the 20th century. Scholarship in oral literature registered an almost comparable achievement, though it suffered a setback through the revolutionary revisionism which came with the triumphal post-structuralism that gripped the last quarter of the 20th century. The brave new world of textuality had arrived with scant attention to orality. the text, in quote, became a determinate fiat, concrete and tangible, in some instances, ethereal and distant in others, a physical reality one more, victim of the metaphysics of absence in others. Jacques Derrida said it all when he declared that, there is nothing outside the text. A controversial statement widely cited as a divine dictum in the discursive practices of enthusiastic deconstructionists. With increasing concentration on bare textuality came an attendant graphocentrism, which privileged written symbols over spoken words, visual analogues over phonemic sources. The seen over the heard. Out went words as the building blocks of the temple of discourse, and in came signs as volatile mercurial aerials of the discursive fairyland, abstract, sanitized, and non-committal. Deprived of their solid affective ontology, words no longer mean. Literature became a constructed game of signs in perpetual play, gallivanting over the field of discourse, flirting with significance, incapable of denotative specificity and gravitas. With this kind of development, would Chinua Achebe rather say, Proverbs are the palm oil with which signs are eaten? Or how should we now translate the Yoruba idiom, Orogbengbe, Amenunwuwo, that is, heavy words that swell the mouth, or heavy signs that swell the mouth? As is obvious here, a basic problem of dislocation has reared up its head. Words, not signs, are what proceed from the human mouth, the process of normal articulation. The word is round, pulsing, flesh and blood. It can cry, bleed, laugh, love. The sign cannot. By reducing words to signs and the verbal mini process to a signifying method, Derrida and other post-structuralists rob the world of full semantic accountability. It sounds reasonable to assume that the replacement of the word with the sign is the product of the same intellectual and epistemological mechanism that produced the author. That was an article, first by Barth and then later by Foucault. There is a similar relegation of accountability, the same erasure of agency, the same metaphysics of performance without performer, the same disregard for the primacy of the human voice, the same appeal to the autolecticism of the communicative process as a self-propelling engine. Orality and its traducers. Long before the advent of post-structuralism, it had been the practice of European ethnographic studies to portray the so-called non-literate societies in ways that assaulted their very humanity. Consider Lucien Lévy-Bro's, now my Egmont, Professor Adam Alekun tried to help out here. Les fonctions mentales dans les sociétés inférieures. Why didn't this man write this in Yoruba or Hausa or Igbo? More or less, the translation is the functions, the mental functions of inferior societies. They were considered inferior because they were not writing communities. Franz Boas's The Mind of the Primitive Man. Levi-Strauss's The Savage Mind. Jack Goody's The Domestication of the Savage Mind. One was 1966, the last was 1977. Constant in these titles are the works they name are words like inferior, primitive, savage. For good measure, Jack Goody, taking a cue from Levi-Strauss, devotes his own book to the domestication of the savage mind. Oh yes, domestication, with all its elemental animalistic denotation. But in a way, the savage had a lot to be grateful for. At least they have progressed from the savagery of Levi-Strauss, 1966, to a redeeming domestication in the ethnographic characterization of Goody in 1977, all within a period of just more than 10 years. But how did these scholars arrive at the inner chambers of the savage mind? What route did they take? What means of transportation? How deep is their knowledge of the language of their so-called savage subjects? How much of the complexity of their culture, their ontology, their noetic specificities, their science of being could they grasp? How much memory or nostalgia of their own European culture did they take with them on their journey to the savage territory? Needless to say, the authors mentioned above operate within a rigid Manichaean framework which traps humanity in a dichotomous categorization: superior versus inferior, civilized versus savage, primitive, progressive versus static, and the subject of this lecture, literate written versus oral spoken. As if all knowledge, all wisdom is prisoner to the inflexible monopoly of the written word, orality and the cultivation of the spoken word is almost invariably regarded as a mark of savagery and inferiority, a state of forlorn primitivity from which humanity is gratefully rescued by the domesticating power of literacy. Orality is thus seen as a state of infantile disability. The oral person is perceived as a perpetual baby. Even the scholarly and ostensibly liberal Walter Ong is not free of this narrow categorical Darwinism. Although at the beginning of Orality and Literacy, one of his most important books, he drops the useful hint by saying, writing can never dispense with orality, that's page 8. His argument in the rest of the book portrays him as one who sees orality as childhood, as a childhood state, which humanity must outgrow in the race for progress and civilization. In a manner which echoes those of Levi-Strauss and others mentioned earlier, his book is strewn with magisterial proclamations and dubitable aphorisms. And these are some of them. Oral cultures have no dictionaries and few semantic discrepancies. 2, the oral mind is uninterested in definitions. 3, oral folks are only capable of situational thinking. 4, oral thinking is not analysis, but it's not analytic, but aggregative. 5, so on. Ong also devotes some space to his own understanding of the oral state of consciousness and oral habits, oral habits, thought, and expression, averring again authoritatively that oral thinking lacks formal deductive procedures. Its discourse lacks syllogistic and inferential meaning. In Ong's thinking, literacy is the cure for all these disabilities and deformities. And the claims is pontifical proclamation with another old debatable certitude. I quote, "We know that formal logic is the invention of Greeks, of Greek culture. And after it had interiorized the technology of alphabetic writing." Need we ask Mr. Ong who the we are and how many other cultures in this wide world they knew before awarding the trophy to the Greeks? The impossible death of the spoken word. Now, let us ask, is oral culture so devoid of rational capacity and other properties of human intellect? Hardly any comfort in this regard in Mr. Ong's condescending casuistry. Oh, oral folks can think. Problem is, they cannot think formally, deductively. Is the oral noetic system so situation-bound that it is incapable of anticipating, foreshadowing, imagining beyond the here and now? Is the oral process so operational that it is devoid of the categorical? Is the savage mind so bound to the concrete and physical that it is incapable of probing the realm of the abstract and the invisible? Now, some bit of personal testimony. I grew up in an oral culture in which people are fully aware of the integrity of the mind and its infinite possibilities. The Yoruba differentiate between Okawe, that is, those who read books, and Okanu, those who read the inside, that is, who plumb the possibilities of the mind. Inside, a highly polysemic, polydimensional Yoruba concept is the seat of thought, imagination, perception, apprehension, the original habitation of nous, N-O-U-S, that is so deep, so individuating, so cerebral, without losing its visceral coordinates and possibilities. It is the seat of Laakaye, without which all thinking, all rationality is simply impossible. Iwe, book, is regarded as a powerful object, full of knowledge and useful facts, but it cannot by itself confer wisdom, perception, without the agency of Inu. In other words, the Yoruba distinguish between learning and law, L-O-R-E, acquired competence and innate cognition. The really accomplished person is one who is able to combine Inu's wisdom and noetic profundity with Iwe's knowledge and learning. Indeed, It is the fertility, the infinitely flexible capability of Inu and Ogbon that make the human being an amazing creative person, and society an organism that keeps inventing and reinventing itself. And I have seen Ogbon Inu at work on different occasions and different circumstances. The witty barb of satire, the body boisterousness of the ballad, the wrenching accuracy of the well-appointed proverb, the healing restorative power of the Babalawo or Dibia, the tact, diplomacy, and legendary patience of the jurisprudence of elders at the settlement of communal disputes, and also the perverted calculation and cunning of evil. I come from a feeling, thinking, creating, imagining culture which values power and potential of literacy without for once losing sight of the fact that the human mind came before the book, the spoken word before the written symbol, and that the relationship between these two sets is that of mutual enrichment, not exclusive replacement or Manichaean antagonism. When Ong reduces most oral poetic expressions to formulaic coinages, what credit does he leave for the spontaneity of spoken cultures? When all communication is so situational, what do we say about the flights of fancy that produced the great epics? When all claim to deductive reasoning is denied, how does the expert explain those proverbs, aphorisms, riddles, mind games, and witticisms so prevalent in oral cultures? When Ong declared pontifically, there is no way to refute the word of primary orality. All you can do is walk away from it into literacy. Are we bound to honor this invitation to a one-track, monodirectional trip to a land without reflection, without shadows? Is the break between the two so clean, so clear-cut, so mutually exclusive? Beyond the prison of print. The transition from oral to scribal glides on a bridge which facilitates a forward leap without foreclosing a backward glance. It is an additive rather than replacive process. For the gray zone between the two lie the acres of ideational, noetic, epistemological, and stylistic possibilities. In their mutual seepage reside a modern method which provide human culture a route on which to stand, wings with which to fly. We cannot fail to appreciate the manifold benefits of the technology of writing, the permanence it has bestowed on our fleeting thoughts, the numerous ways its visual essence has enabled our cognitive capability and analytical power, its rigorous discipline and frugal selectiveness, its capacity for record keeping, memory, and recallability, its relative triumph over the tyranny of time and space, its liberating and individuating potential. That is writing. However, powerful and useful as writing has come to be, it still remains a secondary mode of communication. The human voice clearly outsounds the written symbol. No other means of communication invented by the human being has succeeded in supplanting the primacy of the spoken word. Perhaps, in no other literary genre is spoken word more crucial than poetry. That verbal art form, mean by sounding and to sound by meaning. All poetry pays direct or indirect homage to the human voice. All poetry, minus perhaps concrete poetry, which in its own case prefers being uttered by the eye. A poem on paper is a prisoner in a neat and friendly prison. A bottled gin foaming in its glass encasement, pushing against the cork, rearing for an exit. A poem in print is a promissory note awaiting full realization by the human voice. A good poem soon outgrows its enforced habitation, steps beyond that silence of the paper confinement, and walks straight into the universe of sound and sense through the tunnel of the larynx and throbbing highway of the human mouth. The voice came before the verse, the song before the sonnet, the muse before the music. Every successful poem affects hauntingly, alluringly. But how can a poem affect without the magic of its sound? How can the poem mean without affecting? The griot, the bard, the troubadour, the town crier, all came before the scribal versifier. The village square before the closet. Tellurian and nomadic, these minstrels sowed their words in the wind. Those words fluttered into pigeons. The pigeons bore their tidings through the portals of every ear. Poems without their sound are like masquerades without their costume. What is left of an aura without its awe? Poetry is not only one of the earliest and most universal of humanity's inventions, it is also one of its defining achievements, faithful ally and enabler of song and music. Those two great accomplishments which have been very close to the core of human civilization. Nothing accomplishes poetry's life flow more effectively than the traffic between mouth and ear, whose vital freight is the word and the sound which lends wings to its flight. This is why each time we commit poetry to the page, what we actually do is reduce, that is in the most literal sense, reduce it to writing. Invent flat, intangible signs for symbols, for phonemes, which come out of the mouth warm with human breath. For to speak is to intrude upon the universe, to cause a stir in the airwaves, to displace silence with particles of sound and rhythm. To speak, to talk, is to carry out the biological act with a vast social consequence. The phenomenology of sound engages the major part of the human body, with the diaphragm and the lungs providing the articulatory energy, the vocal cords serving as the sound box, the mouth as the amplifier, while the body functions as the resonance cavity. The spoken word makes waves, creates vibes, shakes and rattles the body. It is at once cerebral and visceral, physiological and physical. It is transitive in its tangibility and urgent in its pragmatic immediacy. When the Yoruba say, Ojúlọ̀rọ̀ wà, súnmọ́ bí kí n gbọ́rọ̀ ẹnu rẹ, the word resides in the face. Move closer that I can hear the words of your mouth. They refer to those gestures, nuances, and facial movements by which the reader registers their meaning and transmits the message. For in physical communication, the body is a dictionary. The face is a thesaurus of hints and silent symbols. An important part of linguistic communicative competence is the ability to read the face and hear its cadence, because ẹni tó gbójú, that is, the person who can read the face is the one who understands the language. Poetry thrives best when it flows unhampered in that channel between the mouth and the ear. When both speaker and hearer can savor the words, toss them up and down, check them for weight and size. Nothing in a poem on paper can adequately capture the fluidity of sound, the cadence and caprice of the voice, the modulations and inflections which endow words with that majestic magic of music. Every language has its own music, but in different tempos and varying timbres. In those languages where the music is latent or somewhat suppressed, poetry has a way of bringing it out and investing it with a suppleness and vibrancy which may surprise the ears of even the native speaker. Poetry is constantly partial to music. Constantly. I'm happy that His Majesty, our Professor Las is here talking about music and poetry. Yes, the primordial bond between the mouth and the ear. For instance, the Yoruba word for poet is akewi, one who utters or chants poetry. Despite almost 2 centuries of scribal experience, Yoruba remains fervently faithful to the oral virtuosity of poetry. A hardly surprising phenomenon, considering the very nature of the language and its speakers. A syllable isochronic, intricately tonal language, the union of consonant and vowel is musical conspiracy. The issue which results from the union is a musical event. Sounding is meaning. Meaning is sounding. It is a language brimming with ideophones, linguistic formations in which the idea, that is ideo, and sound, phone, are frequently fused. So much so that the drama of the communicative event is a function both of the right choice of word and the right choice of sound. Ideophones endow Yoruba language with able phonosemantic possibility, which facilitates a ceaseless generation of new sounds for new ideas. In the suggestiveness of the sound is echoed the burden of the meaning. Let us take a look at this piece of Ewebu, poetry of abuse. Fetí sí mi kí o gbọ́yì ara rẹ, olójú béú béú bí ojú eku ẹmọ́, abètè jàǹrà bí etí ẹṣin ànáyè, kàkà kó ṣiṣẹ́ sùn fọ́nfọ́n. Well, translation is impossible with idiophones, but something like, listen to me and see your worth, you whose eyes are like those of a rodent, you whose lips droop like the ears of the horse of Anaye. I have an Ikere sister here. When I say Anaye, you know. You whose lips droop like the ears of the horse of Anaye. Instead of working, he sleeps like a log. This is no translation because it's difficult. Beu beu jano, fon, which are of course absolutely untranslatable because as idiophones, they are so intricately bound up with the sound system of the source language. They serve as the quiver for which the satirical arrow of the poem is shot. The thrust and the attack is in the humor secreted in the sounding of the highlighted words. And that sounding is a function of their tone distribution. High tone throughout in beu beu, low tone in jana jana, middle tone in fon fon. The phonological peculiarities of these words contribute significantly to the prosodic identity of the whole poem. Needless to say, poems of this kind, which abound in Yoruba, can only thrive by oral communication. Chirographic, typographic, and electronic media may come in handy in their preservation and wider dissemination, but their soul and sense reside in the oral medium. The Yoruba frequently engage in tonal wordplay, tonal games involving tonal counterpoint. Professor Bangboshi and Professor Latunji are my teachers here. Ojo bata bata bata, lupala bata, osirigi sirigi sirigi sirigi, osirigi sirigi sirigi sirigi, osirigi sirigi sirigi sirigi, osirigi sirigi sirigi sirigi. Eba ngbando igbe jangbala jubulu jubulu jubu jangbala. Eba ngbando igbe jangbala jubulu 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 jangbala. I haven't made any effort to translate because I don't want to die young. Without any doubt, the three pieces above constitute a veritable nightmare for the translator. Some are partially translatable, others defy translingual rendering. But the problem of translatability is a mere hint of the even more intractable problem of media transposability. In other words, what kind of function, what kind of existence do these lines, these words assume on a written, printed page, deprived of the playful gymnastics of the human tongue? In one, that is number one above, we come to a meeting point of the idiophone and onomatopoeia. They are not the same. Bata, bata, both encode through sounding the action of the falling rain, while at the same time idiophonically suggesting the frantic movement caused by the action. Also significant is the deep structural and phenomenological contrast between bata, of which is meant to protect Alaba, that is the owner of the hut, against the former. The drama of the whole line is located in the cumulative repetition of the two syllables ta and ba. The music of the line lives in that repetition. The music of number 2 example is even more complex, more intriguing. The meaning and function of these lines are to be found in their constituent words as lexemes, but in the tonal counterpoint demonstrated by the contrast between the predominantly, especially terminal high tone in the first line and the predominantly low tone in the second line, contain 2 lines, one of which is made up of words with identifiable semantic signification, while the other complements it with its sounding and musical function. These are just minor instances of the processes at work in a typical Yoruba poem. Music is never a side item in a Yoruba poetic menu. It is the main course, complete with its scintillating zest and flavor. In several other instances, the sounding of a word assumes a more grave, more critical dimension. This is particularly so in poems with sacred metaphysical import. Poems and songs in which words are not only bearers of the message, but also an intrinsic part of that message and the eventual delivery. In no other field of Yoruba poetry is this more prevalent than those belonging to the incantatory subgenre. Here, the human being employing the agency of the spoken word attempts to plead with, appeal to, beg, cajole, persuade, and at times command the supernatural powers to grant a request, satisfy a wish, or honor a pledge. The prayer, that is, the one doing the praying, the prayer assumes the attributes of an attorney before a judge. The dominant feature here are persistence, persistent, aggregative, and repetitive. The fidelity to detail and other locutory techniques designed to achieve persuasion and consent. Here, the efficacy of the word depends upon the accuracy of its sounding. The way to the intended recipient's mind and heart are guaranteed by the sounding. Thus, these poems, words enter into a peculiar alliance, broken up, re-lexicalized, and sent on new semantic errands, empowered by a unique phonosemantic logic. Ewe ọ̀dán ló ní kó dán fún mi, ewe ẹ̀là ló ní kó nà mí là, mo jáwé gbégbé kó mi mo gbé mi lọ, mo jáwé tẹ̀tẹ̀ kó mi mo tẹ̀ mí rì, mo jáwé awọ́ yọyọ èrò lẹ́yìn mi. Again, I'm not going to bother with by trying to translate. But as must be obvious from the English rendering of these lines, at work here is a supralogical phenomenon in which words are connected to conjure, not merely to mean. At the logical structural level, the relationship is phonosyntactic. Ọ̀dán is a noun, dán, verb. Ẹ̀là, noun, là, verb. Gbégbé, noun, gbé, verb. Tẹ̀tẹ̀, noun, tẹ̀, verb. In each case, the noun to the left has its last syllable replicated later in the sentence as a verb. The cognate verbs retain the same sound and tone as did their parent. I'm indebted to my colleague, Professor Kola Owolabi, for that insight. We both draw from the fountain of Professor Bangboshe. There is a certain complementarity about the formations, a certain sameness of sound harbors an effective metaphysic of agreement and compliance. The magic desired by the utterance of the words is secreted in the magic of their sound and sounding. The efficacy of the magic is a function of the accuracy of the uttering. Among the Yoruba, the aesthetics of sounding is regarded as his blessing from the gift of the tongue. But it is a beauty which goes beyond external protocol of mere verbalization. It is a sound investment, an article of faith in the energy certain words are believed to possess, and how the human tongue can get them to release some of the energy. The spoken word calls people things. It can make abstract things concrete and concrete things abstract. It can make things be and unbe. Words are sacred, fragile, hence the saying, "Ẹyin lọ̀rọ̀, tó bá ti fọ́, kò ṣeé kó jọ." That is actually what gave rise to this title. The word is an egg. That's one of my mother's favorite sayings. And what as also, this one is cloned from this. This is the subject of this lecture, Ẹyin lọ̀rọ̀. When the Yoruba say, "Òrìṣà lẹ́nu, òrìṣà kúnlẹ̀bọ," the mouth is a god, one worshipped on bended knees. They are paying homage to the potency of the spoken word, its protean possibilities, its capricious functionality, its ability to make things happen or unhappen through the agency of the human voice, and the will that propels its power of utterance. Contrary to some scholars, to what some scholars have want us to believe, orality is not a childhood state which humanity must outgrow or risk the stigma of being diagnosed with a chronic form of arrested development. It is not something waiting to be thrown away like a used ticket. There is certainly something dangerous in a linearist, one-track mentality which maps human progress in a horizontal, oral, chirographic, typographic, electronic axis, a chronological determinism that makes little or no allowance for a backward glance, without which a forward leap is near impossible. At any rate, the clear fact is that humanity cannot completely outgrow its orality, since that orality is one of the defining features of its humanness. In no other human undertaking is the persistence, the unkillability of orality more evident than the literary arts. Now let's look at the literary arts. It's written. Poetry and the inevitability of utterance. Poetry has its own way of harking back to its primal origins, of insisting on a reunion of the mouth and the ear, of reclaiming its primordial kinship with music, For no good poetry can do without music any more felicitously than honey can do without its sweetness. The age-old ingredients of prosody, metrical finesse, agents of euphony such as alliteration, assonance, consonance, rhyme, rhythm, even syntactic features such as parallelism, symmetry, and balance, all these elements which transform mere verse into consummate poetry are there to provide the kind of pleasure that transcend the competence of the eye. And, of course, the magic of onomatopoeia resides in its ability to divine the meaning of a word from its sound and sounding, and to keep the faith of the sound with the faith of the meaning. Indeed, let's jump. Homophones are the inevitable facilitators of the poem, and both are figures of utterance. They are clear demonstrations of the oral debt that poetry owes to the word. And inevitably, the human tongue is constantly in search of the human ear. Poetry is essentially a performance-oriented, audience-conscious genre. Even when a poet's voice, nothing validates the sense or a sense of mission more robustly than the feeling that they are being heard. That sense of possible audience is always there, even in the most recondite of poems. Poetry can hardly do without an audience. Even when the poet is not sure, the poem has a way of finding or inventing its own listeners. When Robert Browning's Duke declared, "Thus my last duchess painted on the wall, looking as if she were alive." Or T.S. Eliot waxes exhortating lines of the love song of J. Alfred Prufrock. Let us go then, you and I, when the evening spreads against the sky like a patient etherized upon a table. The poets leave us with the impression of an imagined immediacy, the immediacy of an audience. But because this audience is fiction, the fictiveness becomes a talisman which lifts it beyond the here and now, turning it into an audience for all times, for all places. This is no doubt an instance of audience dynamics, regarded by Ruth Finnegan as one of the stable elements of delivery acts. The important point here is the poet's awareness of a listener, even if not an interlocutor. Browning's egotistically demonstrative Duke and Eliot's company-seeking persona are panting for the listener's attention. In some respects, the love song of Mr. J. Alfred Prufrock is also T.S. Eliot's love song. The poet and the persona may trade places. Poetry's voice has really never been completely lost in its wideness, or in the wilderness. Let's lend an ear to Donne's playful but intensely cerebral colloquiality, Hopkins' sprung rhythm, the expansive hearable lyricism of Whitman, Okigbo, Neruda, the folksy polyglottism of Nicolas Guillen. These are not just individual voice prints. They constitute an eloquent part of the spirit of the age. Some aspects of the modern postmodern poetry strives to make poetry an eye game, but there are countless features of humanity's primal verbal art that secure its place as an oral event, stubbornly, ineluctably harking back to that ancient union between the mouth and the ear. This stubborn orality, this constant practice of investing the written word with the immediacy and tangibility of the spoken, they constitute some of the prominent universal hallmarks of Black Africa and the Black diaspora. As Fahamisha Brown, a noted American scholar, has noted in her stupendously useful book, Performing the Word, African American Poetry as Vernacular Culture. Negotiating the space between the written page and the oral performance, the African poet engages the written language in oral terms. This has resulted in a kind of written orality. The oxymoron is powerful. Written orality, in which poetry performs the word. For the Black poet, the word can hardly afford to just be without the urgent imperative to mean. The word is transformative, regenerative, empowering, thus giving rise to various language strategies. The joyful noise of the sermon, which most times writing is an extension of speaking or singing. The mellow, sometimes sweetly melancholic lilt of the blues singer, the solo virtuosity coupled with the polyphonic rift of the jazz artist, the boast and bravura of the hip-hop rap artist, the bardic clash of the slam warrior. In these instances, poetry, even if written, is meant to be spoken, declaimed, as if not written. The words bestow blacker the berry, oh, sweeter the juice, from the blues. The daring picturesque hyperbole deployed in this stanza, the amazing accuracy and originality of the simile, the overwhelming trope of comparison, the lexical repetition of black, the mischievous suggestiveness of the word juice, the Africanization of the dental fricative as th as d, all remind one of the storyteller, raconteur, regaling an audience with the tallness of their tale. There is a certain assertiveness here about blackness that was ancestral to James Brown when he said, "Say it loud, I'm black and proud." People often miss the fact that loud and proud are rhymed. Say it loud, I'm black and proud. And the Black Pride Declaration of its contemporary rappers and slam artists. If black poetry has not completely erased the gap between poetry and song, it has succeeded considerably in narrowing the gap. Langston Hughes, for instance, recognizes the indispensability of a good ear and a good voice to the poetry and the poet. His poetry, even in some of his prose, we have the energized infusion of the jazz idiom, the blues motif, and the piquant rhythm of street-side banter, the scarlet softness of a lover's jeremiad, the merry lay-back ditty of the jukebox parlor. He also knows how to make words imitate and reproduce blood-curdling throbs. The low beating of the tom-toms, the slow beating of the tom-toms, low, slow, low, slow, stirs your blood. Remarkable here, as it is in most of his poem, is Langston Hughes' exploitation of the phonological possibilities of language for musical performative effect. Note the employment of the sibilant sound and assonance throughout the syntactic alternation of low and slow. The predominant use of words with long vowels, low, slow, beating, stirs, all of which produce the phonolexical orchestration that is at the heart of the drama of the poem. Some poems do not only thrive on voice and voicing, their articulation becomes part of a strategy of the sorely oppressed. This is basically the function of work songs and sorrow songs, to use songs which vent the pent-up tribulation of the singer, songs which function both as treat and therapy. Sterling Brown's poem, Southern Road, provides a striking example. Swing that hammer. Ooh. Hey, steady, Bo. Swing that hammer. Ooh. Swing that hammer. Who? Steady, Bo. Ain't no rush, baby. Long way to go. No. At the center of the tragic drama of this poem, which gives voice to the groan and grunt of the prisoner. It is a sound both primal and elemental, one that connects the very heartbeat of the laborer to the movement of the instrument of his labor, in this case, the hammer. When we hear this sound, this interjection as it falls from the mouth or breath of the utterer, but we also know it is an ordinary sound. It is not an ordinary sound, sorry. Its source is deep and distant, reaching back to the centuries of pain and agony, of labor without reward, toil without respite. It heaves forth, and not just forth, but from the human body, but from the abyss of the soul, from a universe of being. It is sound, the sound of the aching body, the quaking earth, the awesome refrain of the symphony of anguish. Its site is not just in the chain gang, it is in the wide world of dehumanized people of the plantation, a labor camp, a narrow prison. It is the groan of the grill of pain, loud with primal moans, ominous with echoes. It is racial anguish, and it is an interjection uncontainable by the silent borders of the written page. The constant attempt to convert the written script into the spoken word is both motive and mission in the poetic theory and practice of Edward Kamau Brathwaite, undoubtedly one of the most voice-conscious, medium-savvy poets in the world, of the world's major poets. In virtually every poem by Brathwaite is the constant effort to revisit history, reconstruct our ideas and experience by interrogating the relationship between sound and meaning, the other dangerous but neglected logic between the two, and the various ways Caliban can actually own prosperous language by sounding it different and sounding it new. Very often, he carries this out through a startling morphological and verbal reconfiguration, as we have in the poem, The Journeys. Egypt, Africa, Mesopotamia, Meroe. The names of the primal subca, Mesopotamia, Meroe, are subjected to a typographical rearrangement that foregrounds their significance through their unusual, unfamiliar appearance. In many of Brathwaite's poems, spelling is destiny. Syntactic reconfiguration is imbued with revolutionary intent. The respelling and resegmentation of these words also call for a new and different way of pronouncing them, calling up their sleeping essence, provoking them into utterance. Thus, our interpretation of these names and words has to involve both the visual and the oral. The rhythm and music of the lines are significantly affected by their reordering. In Brathwaite's poetry, morphological and syntactic is itself performative, a performative cue akin to stage direction in drama. The written orality is hardly surprising in the craft and career of a poet whose literary universe is a thriving diaspora of calypso, reggae, soul, jazz, blues, hip-hop, with a persistent throbbing of indigenous African rhythms in the background. In Brathwaite, the music is never far from the magic. Rhyme and reason are simply inseparable. More and more of modern African poetry is bursting through the prison of the scripted page, now coming back home, insisting on being chanted by the read with the ear. This poetry has largely ruptured the formal straitjacket of Western poetic modes, espousing different aesthetic which privileges the poem as song, deriving its lifeblood from the private. A performance-oriented poetry which calls the drum to its service and makes body movement and face expression a necessary part of its poetic performance. Audience consciousness and eager communicative skills, contemporary performative practice take poetry from the closet back to the public square, expanding its diction and liberating its syntax, insisting on a new differential poetics critical standards. Atukwe Okai, the Ghanaian poet, stands in the forefront of this revolution of performance poetics, or what Deandra has called the expression and transmission of a true African poetics. Okai grabs the audience's attention with a flamboyant play on with sounds. His lines are suffused with alliteration, assonance, ideophones, onomatopoeia. The very titles of his books and some of his individual poems provide eloquent examples. Flowerful logoligi logarithms, or if you like, logoligi logarithm. Valleyville, Ayalolo, concerto. Okai conjures new phonological collocations, turns English words upon themselves in a feat of morphological daredevilry, builds new phonolexical formations, compounding of words and English different at different times and different places. These ebullient linguistic somersaults, those are the words of Deandra. Oh, thank you very much, as if you knew. Bless you. That's a friend of a performer. Yes, we were on Atukwe Okai, compounding words from English and different Ghanaian and Ghanaian languages and other African languages. One or two examples. You foul my Fridays, you starve my Saturdays, you mess up my Mondays. That is from his book Rosimaya that's the poem Rosimaya in Logoligi Logarithm. Another one. The photon from keeps on wailing and weeping, and wailing and weeping. The photon from keeps on booming and moaning, booming and moaning. The oath of phantom from. Here is Okai, a prominent exponent of that brand of verse helpfully typified as sound poetry by Julia Novak, European scholar. Earlier described by Deandra as a feast of sounds. It is bold, entertaining, frequently ingenious, and earful in its excess. One of the early criticisms of Okai is that sound tended to cheat sense, as dramatic flamboyance frequently vitiated the socio-political thrust of the poems. But read or heard carefully, the discerning Okai's poetry reveals a kind of bite that quietly lurks behind the thunderous playfulness. As Deandra has observed, one may wonder whether something is hiding in the pleasant sounds, and quite often something is sounding. This is a revolution that has started, that has been picked up and further refined by another Ghanaian, his compatriot, that's Kofi Anyidoho. In his last book, actually, the last one that I read, he made a promise that from now on, he's going to really utter his words. That he has discovered that the written word cannot carry the weight of his African poetry. And here you have Husago, Husago, Misango, 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 Gong Gong, Misango, 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 Misango. That's Kofi and he irrevocably convinced that the written word can no longer carry the weight of his poetic voice, and Idaho has now begun the practice of accompanying his printed book of poems with their audio versions. This conscious, sustained effort to restore the spoken word to its pride and priority was one of the abiding achievements of J.P. Clark, Topher Okibo, Wale Soyinka, Gabriel Okara. You can see I'm coming home now. Gabriel Okara, the pioneers of modern written Nigerian poetry, whose efforts were complemented on the continental level by the bold innovativeness of the likes of Okot Pabitek, Kofi, and Kofi Awuno. The succeeding generation took up the challenge. Now, I crave your indulgence from this moment because I'm going to mention many, many names. As I say here, this is unavoidable because our tribe is large. That is the tribe of Nigerian poets. And another reason I'm doing this is if we do not mention their names, who else will? Because our tribe is large, we have Tanure Ojaide, whose prodigious poetic output is informed by his theory and pedagogy of the spoken word, and even more, his persistent and passionate defense of indigeneity and rootedness in African poetry and poetics. Odia Ofemun, Femi Oshofison, that fabulous face behind the Okemba Lanko mask. Olu Obafemi, Funsho Ayejino, Chimalom Nwankwo, Hari Garba, Akachi Adimora Izebo, Idris Amali, Ogaga Ifowodo, Joe Uche, Hyginos Ekwazi, Bayo Adebowale, Jack Mapanje, Frank Chipasula, Ezenwa Haito, Kwawo Okpoku Ajiman, Obiora Udechukwu, Osienekwe, Esiaba Irobi, Uche Nduka, Afam Ake, Emmanuel Shehu, Obi Nwakama, Obi Udeozo, Isidro Diala, Tony Adewale Gabriel, Hope Egaga, Ada Uga, Moses Senongo, Sule Egia, Tunde Olusule, Unduka Otiono, Nina Okewale, Denja Abdullahi, Bemisola Adeoti, Ibiwari Ikiriko of blessed memory, Olu Ogwibe, Mark Nwosu, Joyce Ashutantang, Jumoke Verissimo, Susan Kigoli, Promise Okekwe, Sam Omatseye, Ismail Bala Garba, Bayo Lamikora, Dami Ajayi, Chiedu Ezeana, Folake Onayemi, Akinloye Ujo, Henry Oripeloye, Chirikure, Amatori Teso Ede, used to call him Godwin Ede, Daga Tola, Ndubuisi Martin, the ubiquitous Anthony Ebika. It is the audible principle behind the written orality and manifest performability of Remiraji's love song for my wasteland, J.O.J. Nwachuku Agbada's Bomb or Breakfast, Nelson Fashiona's Lyrics of the River, Ademola da Silva's Song of Odamolugbe, the feminist, womanist, out of hiding testaments of Mabel, used to call her Mabel Tobrise, not Mabel Tobrise, a weary woman. Unoma Azua, Maria Lola Shonei, woman of a woman Funke Awodia, and Fumi Aluko, author of the audacious Rhythms of My Dimpled Backside. The pun-driven morphosonic in much of the poetry of Tosin Gbogi and their guided satiric missiles. The witty dialogic objections in Tony Marino. The playful conversational tenor Farouk Sese, Folu Agoy, Ife Sinashi Nwadike, Charles Akinshete. The telling tributes in the lyrical stream of Sergio Badamoshi, Suede Agema, Stephen Kekehe, Kola Tubosun, James Yeku. Hasn't Nemo Bassi, passionate ecologist and practitioner of the architecture of values, shown us that Poems on the Run, that's the title of one of his collections, which he did during the Abacha dictatorship. Poems on the Run are songs at war with the fear and silence fomented by enemies of freedom. When Kabura Zakama calls his new poems Chant of the Angry, and Obarigomba's thunder jolts us with its uncontainable protocol, do we need to be told that they are taking us above and beyond the whisper? So hearably paced, the running lines of Eliata Oribabo, activist poet, curator, and nurturer of rising talents. The aptly titled choreo poem, Efura, is the performative nerve center of Tade Padiola's The Rainfather. Its exclamation mark raises the essential admonition, or its existential admonitory urgency by many decibels. Virtually every line by Abdurrashid Naala is suffused with the fertile indigeneity and nomic lyricism of Dada Kwada, a music genre he has taken from its Ilorin origins and put in university classrooms and back again. In spite of or in addition to his reputation as a cerebral and elusive poet, Sil Chinikoka, often called the father of Sierra Leonean poetry, strikes the reader-listener as a bard of long undulating lines which mimic and mold the rhythm of the oral sentence. His voice-powered narrativity and pause-timed verbal seriations lend his poetic style a griot-like evocativeness and ring that transcend the confines of the written page. Every line in Chinikoka's debut collection, that's The Road to Jamaica, compares a reading with the ears. The music from the resultant scripted orality can be heard and felt in many of his later poems. From page to stage to screen, poetry and the digital delight. Orality, and I'm on my way home now. Orality is that vital attribute of literature that resists being talked about in the past tense. For without it, written literature, as we know it today, would not have come to be. The written word is a shadow, a symbol, albeit an eminently powerful and useful one of the oral. For nothing can ever substitute for the human voice. Poetry's social possibility inheres in its power to talk to, move us, insist that we lend it our ears, endow the communicative process with spontaneity and immediacy. For, as X.J. Kennedy and Dana Gioia have observed, poetry is a special way of speaking that requires a special way of listening, a special way of speaking that requires a special way of listening. And it speaks to us, it speaks to our whole being, our entire humanity. Poetry's elocutionary, revolutionary potential is in the highest, or is at the highest, when words out of the prison of the scripted page, when the hearer can actually read the lips, fathom the frown, and plumb the amplitude of the speaker performer. For in the tactile, hearable, seeable universe of performed poetry, the body is a text. This was the practical philosophy of the poets of the Roaring 60s, who wrested poetry from stuffy seminar classrooms, the classrooms of new criticism, suffocating orthodoxy, put it on campus lawns, street corners, and city squares, reunited the text with the context, highlighted issues of content and social accountability, and pronounced the human agency Ntozake Shange, the Beatles, Bob Dylan, Amiri Baraka, Allen Ginsberg, Lawrence Ferlinghetti, Sonia Sanchez, Jack Kerouac, all explored the route which led our ears to our minds in their bid to get the world to see itself anew. The enthusiasm and vivacity of those years attenuated with the chilling conservatism of the 1970s and 1980s, closely abetted by the text is the thin theology of post-structuralism and deconstruction. That is healing. That page is healing right now. The past 2 decades have witnessed a rejuvenation of interest in oral poetry and the aesthetics of performance. Poetry grand slams are on the rise, and the ranks of advocates and acolytes of the spoken word are swelling. Rap keeps churning out new rhymes. The hip-hop generation is out. It's not just the dancing, gyrating bunch. It is also the talking people that have taken spoken word to new, exciting heights. In our own part of the world, the spoken word revolution is alive and loud, especially on university campuses and urban public squares. Efe Paul Azino, the arrowhead and consummate exemplum of this song form, together with his group of young, richly talented and boldly experimental poets, has demonstrated not only new ways of packaging poetry for delivery and delight, they have also reoriented the aesthetic expectations of the audience by redefining the nature and essence of poetry as a literary genre. With a set of videographic choreo poems, including the politically parabolic Guns and Roses, Ola Awakan has extended the parameters of public poetry in Nigeria through his compilation and editing of echo poems, an anthology of nursery rhymes written by very young people, written by public primary pupils for Lagos State. A fascinating platform for the vision and voices of new generations of Lagosian Nigerians. The dynamic, simple poetry, those are his words, Dike Chukwumerije, remains a potent force in this redefinition of the articulation of the poetics of performance. Designations or monikers such as spoken word artist and performance poet are gathering respectability and relevance, and performance aesthetics is ruffling the pages of hallowed typocentric poetics. Enormously important in this revolution is the digital diligence of Akim Lasisi of Udeme and Elele Ture fame, who has moved Nigerian poetry from page to stage to screen. Video iconography has now joined the panoply of poetic symbols as poem after poem unveil their conceits in Technicolor. Audible and unforgettable in this new exciting development is the pioneering blast of unlimited liability, ethical waiting by Wole Soyinka, by Soyinka's blockbuster audio record that rocked Nigeria's political scene in the 1980s and has never kept silent ever since. Nor can we ever forget the pioneering efforts of Olatubosun Oladapo, Olanrewaju Adepoju, Alabi Ogundepo, Adebayo Faleti, the blessed Akinwumi Ishola, and other Akewi, bards, poets, whose powerful voices on radio, television, and video rediscovered for their audience the beauty and power of Yoruba poetry. The walls built by guardians of theoretical orthodoxy are being assailed by electronic digital warriors. Never again will poetry answer to its misdefinition as a private puzzle written to be read and crammed and regurgitated before a mute, inactive audience. Orality is not a childhood disability which humanity has to inevitably outgrow and cast away as we progress into an adulthood of scripted civilization and exclusory literacy. Neither is it a handicap of the pre-industrial, pre-technological, pre-Western parts of the world, still waiting for the civilizing panacea of the written word. The spoken word is as universal as it is irreplaceable and imperishable. It secures its future by stamping its inevitability on the present and tracing its destiny back to the origins of the human species and its protean vernacular vigor. With the spoken word, humanity has shaped the world from time immemorial, and we continue to do so as long as sound waves stir the wind, and the speaking mouth finds a friend in the listening ear. It is through the spoken word that the universe was pronounced into existence. The word makes things happen. The word makes things unhappen. To utter is to alter. In the beginning was not the Word. In the Word was the beginning. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, Professor Ni Oshundari, NNOM, Poetry and the Human Voice. And now may I call on Professor William Curix. Well, I can understand the students of Bingham University.
Thank you, Honorable Minister, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. I have the honor to give the vote of thanks after the erudite scholar, Professor Ni Osundare. May I begin by expressing the gratitude of the board to the Honorable Minister, Senator Dr. George Akume, who has been ably represented here since the beginning of this program. Madam Permanent Secretary, please extend our good wishes and our gratitude to the Honorable Minister. You have also been here in your position as a member of the board, and we thank you for making time to be here easily. Usually when there's a program near your office, it becomes very difficult to control yourself to not stay permanently in the office. But you've been able to make out time to come out here, and we are extremely grateful and delighted for having you. May I thank my good friend, Professor Femi. I call him Professor. Once you are on this stage, you are a professor. But please, when you are leaving the hall, you drop the title so that we can stay in peace. Well, thank you for making time, and please express our gratitude to Mr. President. He has been very gracious to us on the board of the NNMA. A recent activity, a case in question, is when we took our cry to Mr. President as regards our inability to function effectively. But he came to our rescue, and the product of which we are seeing here today. So please, we are extremely grateful to Mr. President. May I thank the chairman of the board. He has sat in here for the last 3 days. Sir, thank you for displaying a lot of energy. I'm sure I couldn't sit through like you, but I think this is wisdom I've learned from you, and thank you for this. Members of the board, some of them are special names that they have. They have special names, but thank you please for giving the support. No, I don't want to pick a fight, so I'll take it easy. I'd like to specially recognize the body of laureates. To be honest to you, when the national anthem was being sung and you stood up, what came to my mind was that you are creating a knowledge hedge around these young ones. And this hedge is brewing up with new ideas. And just like what the speaker said, this young lady should have waited for Nigerian youths to visit her in 2030. What she would have seen, we would have brought a big pot, and that pot you will see not only yam and potatoes, but there will be new knowledge that will change everything for Nigeria, and she would have fell for the trap of those Nigerians and broken the silence. Nigerian youths, would then in 2030 will have ideas that will rise from their hands like the crystal symbol of a new faith and change our country, Nigeria. Thank you very much for this that you have done. And thank you, body of Laureates. May I then come back to Professor Sundari? I made just a few minutes that I met him. He's a transnational educationist. This is the new concept that the National Universities Commission is pursuing. Sir, you are described here as a linguist, as a poet, as an oracle. I don't know what else to add. I'll call you ancestor. So. But you said many things. One of the things, I was literally mute. But at some point you talked about Jacques Derrida. All right? The post-structuralist viewpoint of language. Charles Derrida struck a note in me. He's actually seen as the founder of what we call deconstructivism in architecture. It's a very important concept. That concept pervades the whole arts. It presupposes that language, art, is complex and may not look simple as it looks. For us in architecture, we understand this very well. The things that look stable are not stable. So what we do, we extract the weaknesses and display to you. And then you jump about and say, oh, we've got a new style of architecture. What we are simply doing is to extract the weaknesses and display to you. Now, poetry, this language, you said you were talking about soft poetry. We do hard poetry. It depends on the eyes now. So we depend on the eye. And we've done very well. I must confess, I'm using this to launder what Nigerian architects have done. I will launder what the poets have done. If you look at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, what has happened is that we have taken the spoken word in the Igbo language and extracted it and abstracted it and displayed those sculptured forms in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. As you pass by, do know that it's an expression of what Nigerian art stands for. Now, I'm talking about from the page to the screen, to the stage and to the screen. Sir, I would like to pay tribute to His Majesty, Professor Lars Ekweme. I'm one of your admirers. I see the way you've been able to move from the page to the stage and to the screen. And it's very effective. Sometimes I sit with people and they say, oh, Nigerian film is all about rituals, it's all about this. But you have touched the nerve of who we are. We don't like to know who we are. Actually, that's the truth. We are embarrassed because this is who we are. So now, we have to know that we are not doing well if we don't want to be embarrassed. But sir, please keep displaying who we are, and we are grateful to you. Professor Sophison, I didn't get the name correctly. I remember watching one of your plays in 1986. Very interesting. How a union leader was very forthright. He conducted himself very well and represented people very well. But at the last hour, someone successfully bribed him. And he it was a mess. We cried. So when the young lady was asking, where will I put your bribe? I remembered what happened in 1986. You had foretold that a time will come when bribery and corruption will even affect those that are standing firm. It's not a good prediction, but this is something that has happened to us. Well, I'd like to thank the distinguished professors that have come. Some of them far and wide. I had someone from Delta University, and then some from Abuja here. You have spent your time well, and we are not regretting it at all. I assure you that the extracts of this meeting will be presented in the best possible form, where it will be easy to access them, but more seriously, where policymakers will have something to do. Now, back to my students. When they said I should come and give, you got the students who are shouting. So I'm a student, actually. So they know, they understand. I understand university students. They are universities of Abuja, I hope I'm right. And then, anyway, you are following Bingham students, so we understand you. And then Nasarawa State University students. All right? I hope they are here. We thank you for coming here. Forgive our shortcomings. You must have seen that video circulating. A young girl accusing parents of not bringing them well, telling us that we are useless people, we are not doing well. What you have seen here is beyond that. You've seen a group of responsible people. You have seen the highest cream of intellectuals in Nigeria, and they have spoken to you in the best language. Your colleagues have joined in speaking to you. They have spoken in poetry, in the language that you will understand very clearly. I want you to know the future is in your hands. Never mind. You've been hearing this for many years, and the old people have refused to move. But there is an earthquake coming, and the earthquake will move out all the old people. So at that point, you must stand your ground. You have to have something to offer. If you do not have anything to offer, you will miss the way. Please, grab something now, and very soon, it will be yours. Thank you very much for coming, and we'll see you next year by the grace of God. Thank you, and God bless you all.
Thank you, Professor Curix. And now to bring to a conclusion this 13th Annual Forum of Laureates of the Nigerian National Order of Merit, may I once again request that we all rise to our feet for the national anthem of the Federal Nigeria. The national anthem. Well, we'll all sing it. Thank you very much, and lunch is served, and it will be in the same manner. The laureates will have their lunch at the banquet hall. The students will be at the pavilion. Thank you very much.